This is Felt Recoil.
All right. Welcome to the Felt Recoil podcast, number 42.
We're getting old.
Can't believe it. We'll be there soon. That's 10 away from a year full of Felt Recoil podcasts. So glad to have you here. My name is Chris, and across from me,
It's Patrick.
And we'll start with our quick rundown of everything. Hurricane Irma, I'll explain why that's all my fault. And then we'll talk about my son's books, a handicap incident at Starbucks. Oh, boy. And illegal confiscation of guns in the Virgin Islands. And I'm not saying that like, you don't touch my Second Amendment's illegal because of the Second Amendment. I mean, there's actually a law in the books that says you cannot go in and confiscate people's guns during the time of crisis. Totally illegal. A polar opposite approach out of Texas, and a Florida hurricane law that protects that very thing from happening. Also, a Georgia teacher has compared support of Donald Trump to the support of Nazi Germany. Isn't that interesting? And the big question, is Russia meddling in U.S. elections? Maybe, maybe not. But we know now that Mexico is, and there's been a court case that proves that. And it's, by the way, they weren't trying to get Trump elected. Isn't that crazy? And our Voda of the Week coming up shortly. First, our charity of choice, Special Operations Warrior Foundation. The Special Operations Warrior Foundation ensures full financial assistance for a post-secondary degree from any accredited 2- or 4-year college, university, technical, or trade school. It also offers families educational counseling, including in-home tutoring to the surviving children of Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Special Operations personnel who lose their lives in the line of duty. This is another of many, many charities who recognize that some people have given the ultimate sacrifice, and the least we can do is give back to their families as we try and memorialize them as best we can. It's inadequate. Nothing we can do is adequate enough. It's all inadequate, but we can be as best and as fully inadequate as possible. And Special Operations Warrior Foundation is helping do exactly that. So please visit feltrecoilshow.com/charities to learn more about the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, a charity we were turned on to, by the way, by Mr. Larry Vickers. So thanks for that. Okay, I have proof positive for you that the left does not believe in opposing points of view. And I know that's maybe...
How could they? They're right all the time.
Right, yeah, exactly right. And it might be a dead horse I'm beating here, and I hate to be cliche, but...
But you're so good at it.
Why fix it if it ain't broken? It popped up in the storybook reading I was doing with my son this week, and it was so absurd, just absolutely absurd, that I thought... I don't want to be the guy that goes, oh, Disney and your gay pride parades, because they're Disney. They can do what they want to do. But my son is a fan. He's 4 years old, so we'll give him some credit and some credit for being 4. We won't judge him too harshly, but there is
a little leniency.
There's a little series of books called Captain Underpants. Are you familiar with this?
In name only.
All right, so here's the premise. It's actually pretty clever in the way it's written, but here's the premise. 2 young schoolboys basically, if I understand correctly, somehow inject the principal of their school with a serum that whenever someone snaps their finger, or they hypnotized him, and whenever somebody snaps their fingers, he believes he's a superhero named Captain Underpants, and he strips all of his clothes off, puts on a cape, runs around in his underwear, and he's Captain Underpants. He was later injected with a serum that granted him superhero abilities. So now this guy can fly, he wreaks all sort of havoc, and George and Harold, the 2 main characters, get left cleaning up the mess every time this guy runs into trouble.
I feel like there's an Anthony Weiner joke in here somewhere.
Probably a good name for him, Captain Underpants. But when your name's already Weiner and you're sending pictures of your junk, I mean, the stories write themselves. So we've read 3 or 4 of these from the library, and he picked out a couple more this week when Mom took him over there to pick out some new books, and he loves them. I mean, he loves them, incessant, wants to read them every night. And I have no problem with the fact, I usually skip over when I read, they do, pretty crude humor, pretty elementary humor, the boogers and the fart jokes and all that. And I was always bothered. I think I think in life, people boil down to one of two people. You're either a fart joke kind of guy or you're not. And there's some people in life who are 30 and still think fart jokes are funny, and those people aren't successful in life. And there's the rest of us who grow past that at 15 and go on and do things with their life. I've never understood the fart joke humor outside of high school. I worked with a guy for a while who fart jokes were his thing. He just, every bit he ever did on the radio ended in a fart gag, and it ended kind of a working relationship we had went sour because I put a lot of effort into a project, and when I couldn't write the proper ending to it, he said, we'll just end it with a fart joke. And I was so insulted that what I felt was an outpouring of my creative energy was literally hijacked with a fart joke, and it just brings everything to such a low standard all of a sudden. I find it just, it's 4-year-old humor. That's why a book that a 4 and 5-year-old would read has fart jokes in it. But the work of, at the time, a 23, 24, 25-year-old radio guy, there's no place for that. And there's certainly no place for that in the demographic we were appealing to, which was women. But I could go on, but I won't. My point is, those are the two types of people you run into in life. And I think they're the same people that gripe about every little thing that's wrong with their dinner order. You go to the restaurant with these types of people, and if the steak comes out slightly undercooked, or, they can tell their tea wasn't steeped in 180-degree water, as Tim Ferriss would suggest it be, they get really upset. And so I think it's a good litmus test, the type of person you're dealing with. Is this the type of guy that would find a fart joke really funny? And if he is, probably not going to mesh really well.
I didn't know you were on the Rise Guys show.
That's horrible. Do they do fart jokes? Because I like
probably.
them. As people, I like them. But, look.
They're nice guys. I'm really not ripping on them as people, but their show is pretty lowbrow.
Well, but here's the thing. To their credit, you got to go lowest common denominator. I mean, I can give you a real life example. I don't know the Rise Guys super well personally. I know them on the street. You've witnessed we would recognize each other because I used to work in the same building as these guys, and I think they're fantastic people. They actually do a lot of good charity work. They do a lot of giving back. Down the hall from them is a radio talent named Tom Steele, and I'm not going to talk about him personally. I'm going to talk about his radio persona versus his online persona. And here's the thing. You look at Tom Steele. Tom Steele has to go to work every day and do a radio show that appeals to basically his wife or an 18 to 34-year-old woman, okay? And Tom is exceptional at doing that. But if you follow Tom on Facebook, a lot of his passion and his leanings is for politics. So there's no place on Tom's show for the politics. He has to kind of pursue that in a personal channel through Facebook, right? So the point I'm making is Tom can't do a show on his station the way he does it. He can't do a show that he would thoroughly enjoy. He has to do a show that his wife would thoroughly enjoy. The Rise Guys can't go to work every day and necessarily do a show they would enjoy. They got to do the show that the guy that gets up and listens to the music they play wants to hear. And that guy might enjoy that kind of crude, lowbrow humor. So can't always fault them, but I'm not trying to say it makes me any better than them or in any way, but it does make me different in the sense that that's why I wanted out of radio, at least the top 40 part, so bad. Was none of that really appealed to me. The guy that did Nights on the Planet when I worked in that building, which is the local rock station here in South Carolina, in Greenville, South Carolina, that guy, he'd have strippers on and porn stars on and that kind of stuff. And that wasn't my bag of tricks. And I didn't want to talk about Britney Spears, which is my personal experience, was being at dinner and realizing I was almost 30 and recognized that everyone at the table was wrong in their gossip about Britney Spears. And I thought to myself, you have to find a new job. You have to get out of this line of work. It drove me crazy. I couldn't.
How did they take it when you were screaming that at them?
That they were all wrong?
Yeah.
I just kept my mouth shut.
And that you had to get out.
I felt embarrassed. I actually went down the hall and I said to the program director of the news talk station, my contract is going to come to an end soon. I think I say soon. I think I was about halfway through it at that point. I said, when it's done, I don't know how I sign a new one. I don't know how I continue to do this. I'm going crazy. I can't do it anymore. I hate these people. We're playing Beyonce and Jay-Z at a time where they were publicly saying they hated people like me. We were playing, Beyonce has a sister. I cannot remember her name, but her sister is a huge supporter of Che Guevara, and I just couldn't take it. I couldn't play the music. I couldn't deal with those people. I couldn't take celebrating people who absolutely hated me. And for me personally, it just became an issue because I couldn't separate the two. And some people can, and I think that's fine and healthy. I could not. I just couldn't. I wasn't gonna do it anymore. But the point is, that's their job. And Solange Knowles, thank you. Remember, she and Jay-Z got in a fight in an elevator. If you remember that, some pretty good video out there of Jay-Z handling business. He ain't afraid to hit a woman. That's all I'm going to say.
He rocks a pretty mean Che t-shirt, too, from time to time.
Yeah, a bunch of commies. It's easy to be a communist when you're rich because you don't know. You have forgotten what it's like to be poor. You've forgotten what, I think guys like Jay-Z and Beyonce, they look at things and they say, I remember being poor and now I'm really rich, and I think there's a great in-between and everyone should be afforded that luxury. But they never are willing to, split their bank account among everybody.
I'm waiting.
We're here
for my share.
Write the check. Anyway, so here we are in a situation where pop culture is inundating the youth of America, and I know it's gonna make me sound like an old bag. This is
curmudgeon.
I'm an old curmudgeon with this, but parents were right in the sense that pop culture should not have any influence on your life because all it is propaganda. They're just spewing hateful propaganda.
It's the Illuminati.
Now, on a level where a 4-year-old, the books I read my son now, I have to read ahead of time. They're geared towards his age, but here's the 2 examples. So I'm reading his book, and we're at chapter 30, whatever, and I say, all right, well, let's get started. And the 2 young characters travel through a time machine to the future, and they meet their future selves and their future selves' families. And both of them have young children, but one of them is gay.
First of all, I've seen Back to the Future. You can't do that because it will ruin the universe
Space-time
if you
continuum.
meet yourself.
Right.
So, no. Now I know why you have to read ahead.
And,
you can't tell your son that.
Yeah, well, that was not my concern, but I see why it would be. Here we are with a children's book where one of the characters has to be a gay man, and so he has a husband, and the other character has a wife, but they both have children. So what route do I take? Do I just skip over the fact that it's 2 dudes who actually biologically can't have children? They are contrary to our very existence. It's a birth defect or a mental disorder. You pick, but it's one of the 2. Or it's just a choice you make, right? Because if you look at it from the evolutionary standpoint, if homosexuality is something you're born with, you have a defect because you cannot procreate. Hey, that's a horrible thing to say. But wait, we're talking from a standpoint of there is no God. This is an accident, and we evolved to where we are. Then you have to admit that homosexuality is a defect in the system. Because if homosexuality becomes what everyone is, the species ceases to exist. It's that simple. So you must admit that it's a choice you make or you have a defect. Because you can't have both. You cannot have both. So do I take that route? And I explain to him, listen, son, this is something people choose to do. They actually can't have children, so that's false. They can adopt other people's children who choose to not want their children in their lives. They can adopt those children, but you actually can't have your own children. Or do I just skip right over it? So I just skip right over it. And I tell my wife, hey, we got to now, we might want to be really careful. We might have to kind of ease him out of liking these books because, they had this thing in there, and that's not something to address with a 4-year-old. And she goes, yeah, you should have read the first part. And so what was the first part? Because she had read the first part, and then, she reads a few chapters to him, and then the other son gets a couple of books.
Thanks for the heads up,
read
Mom.
to him. Right. Well, the first part was all about Fox News and conservatives and legitimately saying, sorry that so many people are upset about my fart and booger jokes. Those are the type of people who only watch Fox News. Literally in the book. And so you go, What is wrong with people on the left that a kid isn't allowed to be a kid? That you have to feed them your propaganda all the time. All the time. And I used to make this comment about church and kids, and I still somewhat agree with it, where when I was in high school, we went to church 8 times a week. We went to church twice on Sundays, Wednesday nights, and then I went to a private school where you went to a church service every day, Monday through Friday. And so 5 years of that, and you start to kind of go, man, I'm really just inundated with the church. And you would just constantly hear the same thing over and over. And people in authoritative positions would want to understand why you were frustrated with it. And I'd go, well, look, if you force feed somebody things, they're bound to regurgitate it. They're not going to hold it down. They're not going to want it. You're just force feeding it on people, okay? Kids, teenagers naturally don't want to sit through 8 or 9 hour-long services every week. It's just natural, okay? It's good discipline, but it's not something kids want to do. So the reaction is you become 20, 21, you get out of it, you don't have to do it anymore, you just don't do it anymore because you were pushed into it for so long. Why does the left grab that idea and constantly force feed it? Well, the truth is because you don't want them thinking in a different way, right? That's why you surround people. You are afraid of free thought. And the left is so fearful of people that think for themselves. It's exactly what's going on with the Confederate monuments all over. Do you see Houston pulling down their Robert E. Lee statue today? For what? I can't even remember why the Confederate monuments are such a deal, except that somebody in Charlottesville was protesting the removal of one. And when the violent Antifa people showed up and somebody got hit with a car and died, suddenly every Confederate monument has to come down. It's the most absurd thing, and it's just indicative of the fact that the left hates free thought.
I watched a minute or two of them removing that statue in Dallas today, and one of the things I noticed was that either they kept the protesters away or there just weren't any there, which to me leads me to believe there probably weren't a whole lot if the media wasn't bothering to cover it because no one cares anymore.
Right.
Who cares?
Yeah. I mean, it's already over.
But if you're fighting monuments, you're not out there actually fighting any real injustice or any real evil in the world.
And let's really put it in perspective. You're exactly right. Highlight that point. You're in Dallas, Texas, tearing down a Robert E. Lee statue. And just down the road from you in Houston, people are literally fighting for their lives after Hurricane Harvey came through and ransacked, the 5th or 6th largest city in the country. Yeah. And you're Dallas, and you go, still need to take down that Robert E. Lee statue, though. Your resources and your effort should be dedicated only to helping your neighbors right now. Nobody cares about race in Houston, Texas right now. Only in Dallas are they worried about somebody being offended by someone that did something a long time ago that never affected them.
Well, let's just get our priorities straight.
Exactly.
So for example, guy's name is escaping me right now. He's the mayor of New Orleans.
Right. Oh, the old one?
No,
or the current one?
Hang on, I'll find it. Point is, 15 of their 16 pumps that keep that city from being underwater because it's built below sea level have not been working for who knows how long now.
Mitch Landrieu.
There you go. He's a goober because he's been all worked up about making sure we remove all these Confederate statues from all over New Orleans and not worrying about the actual well-being of the citizens who elected him.
Infrastructure doesn't matter, just people's perspective of the city.
Well, I mean, isn't it funny, though? The leftists that are for big government don't seem to care about the things that big government is supposed to do, like protect its citizens.
Right. Well, their feelings. Protecting their feelings.
Right, yeah.
Is he related to Mary Landrieu? Wasn't that... No. I'm messing it up. Blanco was the governor when Katrina hit. Do you remember that? And she and Nagin didn't call in the feds.
Yep.
And then it turned out she was actually, while they were cleaning up Katrina, she was spending $1 million to renovate her mansion. The governor's mansion of Louisiana.
But George Bush hates black people.
Yeah, well, according to Kanye. And, that's another thing. It's so funny. This stigma now where any slight against a person of color is only because of the racism of the person committing the grievance is so absurd. It's as absurd as tearing down these statues. It's this idea of the girl whose Facebook status is getting passed around because she said these hurricanes are hitting minority communities that are doing well because Trump wants to wreck their economies. That is legitimately something someone put on the internet that is being passed around, and everybody's laughing at it, making fun of it. But it's the same idea that if something bad happens to me and I happen to be a person of color, well, it's only because I'm a person of color. I saw somebody share, and this is what they do that drives me crazy. I saw a girl share something the other day from a page that was called "You Know Your Parents Were African When," and there's all these dudes line dancing. Okay, it's black guys line dancing, essentially. And I thought to myself, no, wait a second.
Are we talking the Macarena or Achy Breaky Heart?
Maybe a good mixture of the two.
Okay.
Maybe like I hope it rains and the lion doesn't eat me because they're from Africa.
Got it.
But
I love that one.
What part of Africa are you proud of? What part of Africa are you proud of? Let's run through a quick list. Is it Egypt, where Coptic Christians are constantly kidnapped and sold into sex slavery? Is that the part you're proud of? Egypt that enslaved the Jews for so many years? Is it Rwanda, where black people kill black people at an exponentially and alarming rate? Is that what you're proud of? Is it Rwanda? Right? Is it the Sudan, where black people are killing black people in droves? Okay. Is it South Africa, where white people have violently killed black people for years and now black people have control? What part of Africa are you saying you're so proud of? Is it Zimbabwe? Do you know in Zimbabwe it's illegal to be white? Do you understand that in the country of Zimbabwe, Mugabe made it illegal to own property and be white? And if you go there and you're white today, you will likely die. And if you haven't read the book Mugabe and the White African, you should. And then you should go watch the documentary, and you should see how this family is literally hung from trees and tortured simply for being white and owning property in Africa. Is that the Africa you're so proud of? You know your parents were African when they can brag about torturing white people. You know your parents are African when they can trace their ancestors to the people who actually literally sold slaves to Hispanics who then brought them to America and sold them to white Europeans. That's your African heritage. That is the heritage of Africa. Arab slave traders coming into a continent, conquering it violently, and then selling people to Hispanics out of Spain who brought them to the North American continent and sold them to white Europeans. By the way, the majority of those black people out of Africa went to Arab states. Never even saw the light of day in the U.S. The vast majority, and I'm talking nearly 90% of them, went to Arab states. So stop. Stop with your crappy, disingenuous African heritage pride, because all it is a heritage and history of racism and violence and warlords and just crazy disruption constantly. Here's what I need you to do, and I'm talking about Africa as a continent, okay? Before you get, oh man, it's just mad at black people. No. I'm talking about Africa as a continent. I'm including South Africa, largely run by white people, violently racist, violent, horrific people, okay? Pick a country. Pick one in Africa and tell me why you're proud of being from there. Tell me why your history traces to there and why you're proud of it. It's just, the big point I'm making here is it shows the left's ignorance of actual history and their absolute, what I think is a downright position against acknowledging actual history. They're what's the word I'm looking for? They're just violently opposed to true history. Violently opposed to true history. And it's hard for me to wrap my brain around how you take an honest and objective look at history and decide, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be proud of the Democratic Party. I'm going to be proud of being from Africa. Be proud of. There's a whole lot of things you shouldn't be proud of. Okay, if you look at actual history, the smart move is to view history in the scope of everyone made mistakes, and we have to learn from those mistakes and correct it. I think I've said this here before. It's one of the things about the Bible that I find so fascinating, because you tend to, I grew up in a Christian home, I know you did too, and I still hold to the faith. I have a lot of criticisms of kind of the religion, like I tend to believe Thomas Jefferson was onto something, the fact that he said, I believe in Christ, but it's the religion and the church that is flawed. I think there's a lot of flaws. I think we do a lot of things wrong when we set ourselves up. My situation was I felt like people were making themselves on par with God, where they were God's like authority on earth, and I had to obey them or else. That was a problem for me. It wasn't ever my parents or anything. It was largely like the structure of the school I went to. But here's my point. The thing we do wrong with the Bible is people look at the Bible and they want to use it against you because you do things wrong, right? Well, the Bible says this, the Bible says that, and you should do more of this. Okay, that's good. That's all well and good, but you do cross a line where we tend to forget that everybody in the Bible was a bad dude. Everybody, from Noah to Moses to Adam to Eve to King David, bad dudes. All of them. Seriously flawed individuals. Bad dudes. David had a guy killed so he could sleep with his wife. That's about as bad as it gets. Yet the Bible calls David a man after God's own heart. So what's the point? The point is, seriously flawed people can do great things. And they can be worthy of admiration, but you can never forget the fact that we're all flawed people. Every one of us, by nature, flawed. Bad people. So that's what I wish we would do with history. You can be proud of an African heritage, but don't act like you get some sort of superiority because you have an African heritage. It's actually pretty bad. It's pretty terrible. Africa and its history.
But I wonder how many people that celebrate that actually know how bad it is.
None of them.
They just have this idea in their head that, everything must be sunshine and lollipops.
Yep.
Throughout the history of Africa.
And what do you get, though? What do you get if you can convince somebody, let's just say that there's someone you and I want to control, right? And that person says, well, I love my African heritage. You and I would say, and you should. And you should. And you know what? I'm sorry for the way America treated your people. And that person goes, yeah, that's right. And then we get to say, and I hope that I have your support as I run for office to make sure that never happens again. And they go, yeah, of course. Yeah, you have my full support. The left preys on the ignorance of people. That's why Barack Obama was so successful. Nobody wanted to know anything about the guy outside of his skin color. His election was the greatest exploitation of black people since slavery. Hands down, a great exploitation of black Americans was to convince them to vote for Barack Obama, who didn't care about them, only cared about himself, only cared about, I'll attend a church or quote unquote be a member and never attend it. I'll give them a ton of money, but I'm joining a church that tells these people they can only vote for black people, which is true. Those people were told, you vote for black politicians, you only do business with black-owned businesses, on down the list, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A very racist church, steeped in racism, and that's the only reason he was a member. It's because he knew I can walk in, and even though I'm actually half white, and even though I'm the product of a white family because my black father abandoned me and then killed himself in a drunken car crash, but I met him twice in my life. Anyway, I happen to look like him, so I get to exploit other people who happen to look like my dad. It's a vicious thing. But anyway.
I think just like if someone's proud of whatever heritage they are, and that's a unfortunate history, I think the same thing that people need to consider right now with the removal of all these statues, especially Robert E. Lee, who holds a special place in my heart, because I think he was a great man. I really do. I bet if you ask any of these people that are out protesting the existence of these statues, anything about that man, they couldn't tell you anything about him.
Confederate general. So, racist.
Right.
What else you need to know, Hulon? You racist too, I guess. Yeah, I'm with you.
Well, I would tell you that most universities have a code of honor. And Robert E. Lee is basically the person who invented that.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
after the Civil War, he became president of what was Washington College at the time, and now is Washington and Lee. And a student came up to him and asked him what the written rules of the school were. And Robert E. Lee said to the student, "We have but one rule here, and that is to always be a gentleman." And so,
because no women were allowed, which was smart,
right?
Real smart. I don't know what we were thinking. Anyway, go ahead.
Point of the story is that
all I'm saying is we let them vote, and then we get Hillary Clinton. Okay, so if you need any more evidence that there was a mistake made, and you're a moron. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you're onto something here. I'm gonna let you have it.
I mean, if I could be about women like Robert E. Lee was about the blacks, I would do it.
Wait a minute.
Oh, sorry. All right, but go ahead. So he invented like code of conduct at colleges, huh?
Yeah, basically.
How ironic then that these people are defying rule of law, storming campuses, and just angry about it.
Again, they don't know who they're protesting.
They should be out there protesting themselves, and they kind of are, which is funny with the anti-fascist crowd. Anyway, all that is to say, I find it funny that in the books I read a 4-year-old, which are written for his age group, I have to decipher between liberal propaganda. They are terrified to just let a kid be a kid, to enjoy himself, to have a innocent comic book hero that he can look at and laugh at. I don't mind the boogers and the farts and all that because he's a kid, although it's not something I'm going to encourage him to find entertaining. I'm going to hope to raise the bar there a little bit. I do find great remorse in the idea that now we have to filter through the books he's allowed to read. Obviously, we would anyway, but I mean, you're talking, again, a comic book about a superhero who is a brainwashed principal that wears his underwear and a cape. Like, that's absurd on its face. Just let the kid have fun with the absurdity of it. You don't have to preach your leftist gospel at him. It's unreal. It's unreal. It's unreal. And, you know, as we say, you know, the logical next step is going to be now we're going to have characters in Captain Underpants who were born a man but then decided to be a woman and had a surgery. And so now, you know, we're going to have to deal with that and on and on. And
well, they got to get it to where your son thinks that that's totally normal.
Totally normal.
By the time he's like, say, 10.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's the goal, right?
I think so. It's brainwashing. It is propaganda and brainwashing at a young age so that it's accepted because the author of these books is making it clear that very uncool people who don't like people like you and me have complained about this, and here's what they partake in, here's the way they think. And I find that to just be, A, immature on his part, and B, quite frankly, unethical, and really, you know, basically immoral. Because if you're an author of children's books, and your job is simply to entertain, just entertain. Entertain. Stop being typically Hollywood, where you think everybody cares what your opinion is. Hollywood thinks that there's a slump in the box offices and their business these days simply because of the economy. But the truth of the matter is we all know that Hollywood is slumping because everybody's tired of their crap. Nobody's buying what you're selling anymore. So straighten up. Think about it. Okay, I want to share, just for some levity here, I have to tell you a story about just minding your business. And it's a good one. It's a doozy. I do not like, maybe it's just me. Tell me if you're wired this way, because I am. I don't like other people getting in my business. And I mean, especially in public, okay? So let's just make a scenario up.
I don't even tell that many personal stories here, so yeah.
Right. If I'm in public, and let's just say, oh, wait, let me think. There was a woman who did this once with my son, and I kind of shut her up really quick. What was going on? She said he was going to choke on something. My son, my oldest son, was maybe 2 years old at a time. We had a neighbor that was this way. She would come over and get in all of our business. We'd be out in the front yard. We were renting this house, and she was really the catalyst why we moved. We could not stand the neighbor. She would come into our yard, and she would talk to our kid, but she would be talking to us. It was very passive aggressive where she'd go, oh, well, aren't you a cutie? Well, I certainly hope you have your sunscreen on and your parents need to get you a hat so your head doesn't burn. And I would be like, I'm going to kick you down the hill. And if it doesn't break your hip, I'm going to come down there with a brick and make sure it happens because I'm so tired of the way you treat us. It was so rude.
This is Chris staying out of other people's business.
I'm telling you, man.
I'm going to break your hip with a brick.
It was so rude. So I was in Target one time with my son, and the same thing happened where he was like, he had something that was in packaging, and he put it in his mouth, and this lady turned around, and she goes, oh, aren't you a cutie? I sure hope that Dad takes that out of your mouth because you could suffocate on it. And it was something very loosely close to that, you know? And I go, or you just mind your business. And she just glared. And I was like, he's not choking on anything. Well, you know, he could choke. If he bites into that, he's going to choke. Well, guess what? He didn't choke. So I'm right, you're wrong. He didn't choke, I win. You're stupid, you know? So that just kind of becomes, it's so irritating. I hate people being in my business. And especially when you can sense how disingenuous it is. When they're just trying to prop themselves up as some sort of superhero come to save the day, but they're really just an idiot looking for something to talk about. And it's exactly what happened at Starbucks the other day. It was a beautiful thing, and I felt so happy that the guy just realized what a moron he was as it happens. So I come out of Starbucks, and there's a lady parking in the handicap parking spot, literally right at the door, okay? And so I open the door, and we're in the South, so you do the right thing. I stood and held the door, so waiting for her to come out and get through the door, and she started taking a minute. And then I instantly regret stopping to hold the door because it's taking a while. But she gets out of the car. She closes her door. She fumbles with her keys. She drops her keys into her bag. And I'm standing there holding the door. Well, there's a second guy, and he has stopped, and he's waiting inside the exit for her to come through so she doesn't feel crowded. Very polite thing to do. Well, there's a dude who appears, for everything I can tell, to be drunk or high or just stupid. Might have been the latter of the three. And he's got a chick with him, and I think he wanted to show off a little bit. And so he says very loudly to this woman getting out of a car, hey, and he like waves and flails. He's no more than 6 feet from her, okay? Waves and flails. Hey, you know what? And she looks at him, and she goes, and he goes, you know what? And she taps her ear and shakes her head, indicating she's deaf. She can't hear him. And he goes, I told 2 people they couldn't park there. I told 2 of them because they didn't have a sticker that they couldn't park there. And she taps her ear and shakes her head. And he goes back to her car and taps on the windshield and points at her sticker and then raises her palms to the sky like, what are you talking about? And he goes, no, you're fine. But 2 other people tried to park there and they didn't have stickers. So I told them they couldn't. And she goes, and then points at her sticker. And I'm looking at the guy like, shut up. And he does that thing where he's half out of his chair but half in it, you know, like I'm too lazy to stand up, but I want to pretend like I'm not sitting down. And he said, no, you're okay. There were 2 people who tried to park that didn't have stickers, and they weren't actually handicapped. And I told them they had to move. And she goes, like literally makes this noise, like she's just frustrated and fed up with him. So the guy waiting in the exit kind of halfway comes out and grabs her and says, you're good, ma'am. Come on in. And the guy's like, this dude's all exasperated that he couldn't explain himself to the deaf woman. And I thought, what a great example. Like I just, she goes inside, the gentleman that was waiting, and actually he kind of came out in a way of saying, hey, come on in, ignore him, like waved that guy off, pulled her inside, and he came out the door. I let the door go, and we went our separate ways. It took a lot for me to not turn to that guy and go, hey, why don't you mind your business next time? Maybe you just think to yourself, oh, she's got a tag, and she's handicapped, and maybe you give her a wave. If you want to be nice to me, just give them a wave and say, hey, how are you? And they'll go, oh, hey, I'm doing good. And then they go about their business, and you go about your business. But he had to inject himself and prove to everybody what a moron he really was. And it was just, those instant karma videos on YouTube, right? Sure. That's what I felt like I was living. It was just a way of saying, I
wish you had recorded it.
It would have been golden. It would have been gold, but it would almost be mean because you have this deaf lady trying to like explain to this dude, I'm deaf. I can't hear anything, so I park close to the building so I go inside safely. And then he's out there going, hey, I'm a moron. Hey, I'm a moron. Look at me. Everybody, I'm such a gentleman. No, you're not. You're an idiot. All right. The hurricane is coming. Is Irma going to hit South Carolina? Speaking of idiots, could the people overreact any more than they have been so far in the state of South Carolina?
Well, there's no more bottled water here.
At least inland. I'm talking inland.
200 miles in, there is no more bottled water.
I'll tell you. Isn't that crazy?
We still have it here. I found out earlier from a coworker, apparently there is none in Columbia, which I find a little bizarre. Now, I will say this storm is taking a very similar path that Hurricane Hugo took, which devastated South Carolina in 1989. Mm-hmm. And I do remember that storm very vividly. My dad and I were talking about it the other day, and we kind of got a chuckle because we were out of without power for like 7 days. And my dad went and got a generator on day 7, and gassed it up and went to crank it, and as he did, the lights came back on.
Nice.
So I kind of remember that, and I remember how bad it was. I remember seeing the trees all the way up to like Newberry, which is halfway between Columbia and Greenville.
So
devastated.
About 250 miles inland.
At least,
Can we pause for a second? When your dad was out there trying to crank the generator and the power came back on, did he tell everybody, or did he pretend for a little while like it was actually the generator?
He should have acted like, yep, got the whole neighborhood online.
Yeah, because I would have done that. I'd have been like, woo, you guys will never believe it. I actually climbed up the power pole out front, and I hooked our neighbors up to the generator too. This bad boy's powering the whole street.
Yeah, man. 1.21 gigawatts.
Irma is an extremely dangerous Category 5 hurricane, according to the Washington Post. Sustained winds of 185 miles per hour. I was trying to find,
which is the strongest on record, if I understand correctly.
I heard a rumor that it is basically the size of Florida. Like this hurricane could sit on top of Florida and envelop the whole thing. True or false?
From Miami to Tallahassee is 400 miles in a straight line. This storm is larger than that.
Okay, so not quite the entire state, but a good majority of it then.
Darn close.
From the bottom till about 3/4 of the way
Darn
up.
close.
It is all my fault. I want to apologize to everybody in the Caribbean getting torn apart right now, and anyone on the coast of South Carolina, because next week is my son's 5th birthday. And we take a annual beach trip every year, regardless of birthday or not. And we decided this year, let's do it on his birthday, so he feels extra special about it. And that's next week. So,
well, thanks a lot, Dad.
Here comes Irma to make sure the family beach vacation does not happen. And really, there's no alternative. I have to figure out now, and I know what a high-class problem, but there's no alternative, because the alternative for us is go to the Panhandle. And that's not even going to be possible. But anyway, so there's a bunch of models out there. What are the models looking like right now?
Right now, it looks like the storm is passing Puerto Rico, bearing down on the Dominican Republic. Looks like it's made it past the Virgin Islands. I got some friends down there. I watched some video they put up earlier, and it looked pretty scary. But yeah, so it looks like it's going to probably graze Cuba and the Bahamas. And about the time it passes the Bahamas, it looks like it hooks, just a dog leg north, and is just going to go straight over Florida and come straight up to South Carolina. Here's the scarier part, not that as if that's not scary enough. There's another storm right behind it taking the exact same path.
Jose,
right. Can you see?
My goodness. So the big controversy, if you're into guns, is the fact that is he the mayor or the governor of the Virgin Islands? I'm not sure how this works. I'm not sure they're sure either. So this is from NRAILA.org. That's the National Rifle Association's Institute for Legislative Action. It says, the National Rifle Association on Tuesday announced strong opposition to an order signed by U.S. Virgin Islands Governor Kenneth Mapp, allowing the government to seize personal firearms and ammunition ahead of Hurricane Irma. the NRA is prepared to engage the legal system to halt the unconstitutional order. Now, it's not only unconstitutional, by the way. President Bush in 2006 signed legislation into law following Hurricane Katrina, when New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin instituted a similar order and began confiscating legally owned and possessed firearms. The NRA actually intervened then in federal court and was able to halt the confiscations and obtain an order requiring the return of the seized firearms. The NRA then backed federal legislation to prohibit the confiscation of legal firearms from law-abiding citizens during states of emergency. And again, that was signed into law in 2006. So it's not the Second Amendment's there, this is unconstitutional. No. This is codified current law as of 2006. So this guy should have known better. And it brings up an interesting moral dilemma, because if you're in the path of the hurricane and they issue a state of emergency, you know you're on the right side of law. Very familiar, by the way, to this nurse in Utah who was violently arrested by this moron cop who had no idea what the law said and who has since been fired, by the way. They announced that, I think today, that he's been let go completely. That's a confusing situation, by the way. That guy was actually an EMT.
On the side,
who was also a detective on the police force.
Full-time cop, part-time medic.
Here's what his actions resulted in. A, he's lost his job. B, more importantly, actually, the hospital rewrote their policy. And police officers are now no longer allowed to directly communicate with hospital staff. I want you to let that sink in for a minute.
Only supervisors.
Unreal. All right, anyway. So it's there. It's law. And you've got guys like this. So the moral dilemma becomes, they come knocking on your door. Hand them over. No, that's illegal. Hand them over or we're coming in. What do you do?
Well, I tell them about the time I had a tragic boating accident.
Right.
And how I lost all my firearms and Chris's at the same time. I was borrowing them.
Okay.
And I accidentally, I was on Lake Jocassee. It's like 400 feet deep. Right. There's somewhere down there.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Hey, we appreciate that.
You're welcome to them, though.
We appreciate that. We're just going to come in and take a look.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Open that safe for us.
What safe?
The one right there that we're all looking at.
That one fell in the lake, too.
I'm looking at it right now.
That's a refrigerator.
You can either open the safe or we'll open it.
It's just a fancy refrigerator.
Right, but we're gonna open it. We got the torch.
There's just beer in there.
We'll pry it open. Legitimately, the biggest fight I think my wife and I have ever had is when Barack Obama was talking about registering firearms. That was a legitimate concern for a little while, if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
And my wife said, what are we going to do? And I said, nothing. We're not going to do anything. We're not registering any guns. We're not going to get on that list. And it turned into a fight where I was arguing the position of, let me just ask you a question. If they come around and tell you to register your religion, are you going to do that? Are you going to register our kids' names and the religion we ascribe to if they tell you to do that? Because you're putting everybody's life in danger. Putting everyone's life in danger if you do that, because what that leads to is when you're no longer accepted by those in power, when the populist notion turns from, well, we just want to know where the guns are, to we want to take the guns, or the notion turns from we want to make sure that Christians who are practicing hate speech against Islam and homosexuality, we want to make sure their children are educated in a certain way. They come knocking for our kids. Is that going to be any different to you? Because it's the same principle at stake. There was a knockdown, drag out between us because I was saying I will not register the guns. And if you were to go behind my back and register the guns, it'd be a massive problem in our marriage, a massive problem. And obviously it never came to fruition. But the point I was trying to make, maybe very poorly, was there are principles that you stand on, and it does not matter if the world falls apart around you. You have to stand for those principles. So when the cops come and knock on my door, or in this case, the National Guard comes and knocks on my door and says, we want your guns, and I say, no way, not going to happen. And they go, we know they're in the house. And I go, oh, they were lost in a boating accident. They said, then we're coming in. And my reply is, listen to me good. I don't want you in my house. And if you choose to come in, there's going to be hell to pay. And we might both die. Or you just agree that I'm telling you they're not here. And you mark it down in your little list that here's a guy with a family to protect when all hell breaks loose. And we're long gone, by the way. And so we're just going to scoot along. You have to now consider that a governor of U.S. territory issued this. This is a real life thing that could come here without a doubt. You have to consider how you would handle that. That's a huge dilemma to have to deal with in the midst of a crisis unlike you've ever seen before. It's a storm bearing down. It's going to obliterate your home, your work. You're looking for a place to go, and in the meantime, they want your guns. Florida, by the way, kind of the polar opposite. Florida has a law in the books, even though the federal government does too, called the Hurricane Law. Did you read about this?
No, sir.
Where did it go? Here it is. From Breitbart, the law, known as the Hurricane Law, was signed by Governor Rick Scott in 2015, and it allows citizens without a concealed carry permit to carry concealed for 48 hours or at the governor's discretion, because he can expand the window of time, during a mandatory evacuation as they transport their families and belongings from the path of the storm. A Texas sheriff, also on Breitbart.com, named Troy Niels, is from Fort Bend County, Texas. He says, quote, "As far as Fort Bend County, we haven't had looting. I made a comment the other day that we support the Second Amendment. I would caution those that want to come and prey on our people that are suffering so much right now. You may want to stay out of Fort Bend County because you could leave this county in a bag." And not only did he say it, he said it live on Fox News, which is awesome. Awesome, because the host's reaction as this dude's talking is just kind of like, well, all right then. How do I paint this guy as a racist?
That guy just won every election for the rest of his life.
I mean, he'll stay there until he retires. Kudos on them. But what an interesting juxtaposition, as you could say, right? Like, you got the governor of the Virgin Islands saying, let's take everybody's guns, and everybody else is saying, well, arm up, protect yourselves.
Yeah, well, Texas is Texas, right?
Yeah, in Texas, it's legal to use deadly force to defend property.
So, a little different scenario than the Virgin Islands, and I don't understand how this whole U.S. territory thing works anyway. I don't know if all that falls under our Constitution. I have no idea.
Well, usually
the thought has never actually crossed my mind.
So here's what I know for a fact about.
I didn't learn this in school. You might find that odd.
Interesting. Here's what I know for a fact about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is a free state, which is different from a territory. Okay. But in Puerto Rico, most of their population is on welfare that we pay for. They get to vote in our presidential election, but no other elections. They are not citizens, but they are afforded the rights of citizens. And that is why they don't want to become a state, is because they're cashing the check without buying, they're getting the milk without buying the cow, as it were. So they get representation in Congress.
Maybe we could send Hillary down there then.
I think I have it backwards. That would be awesome. I think they get representation in Congress, but they're not allowed to vote. I think that's the kicker.
Yeah, that's correct.
So it's such a muddled mess. Like, why we have our hands in these people's lives, I'll never know.
I don't know a lot
set
about.
Them free. Let them
I've
do
never
their
been
thing.
to the Virgin Islands. I don't know a lot about it. But what I have heard,
it doesn't sound any fun.
Well, no, it doesn't.
Sorry.
What if it was the 72 Virgin Islands?
Definitely not be much fun.
But what I do know is it's actually not a happy place. It is a pretty violent, high crime area.
Yeah.
So,
which is the rumor I've heard of most of those places, right? They take you on the cruise liner and they show you the nice part, but if you go inland, holy moly.
Yeah. You can get your hair braided over here, but don't go that way.
And get your neck taken off over there.
But I mean, maybe there's, and this is not me justifying it, but maybe there's a reason why the governor has said this. Maybe something crazy's happened in the past when hurricanes hit that area and everybody just goes nuts and starts killing everybody. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense. But nonetheless, again, do you think the criminals have their guns legally registered?
Oh, no, of course not. Yeah.
And he's not knocking on the bad guy's door going, hey, we know there's guns in here.
My guns aren't registered either because they're at the bottom of Lake Jocassee.
Yeah, man, terrible. I remember that day. It was awful. It's a big argument I give people for getting their CWP in South Carolina. It's like, well, I don't know. I'm not going to give them all that information. Do you want to make sure the government doesn't know every time you buy a gun? Then get a CWP, because there's no background check. You're not pinging the system every time. You're filling out paperwork and then staying with the FFL. And nobody knows any different.
There you go.
Smart. All right, anyway, seriously, take it seriously. If you're in the path of that thing, don't be a hero. Just get out of the way and go about your business. We are almost out of time. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Underneath at facebook.com/feltrecoilshow, underneath the posting of this episode, you can find all the news stories we kind of accumulated throughout the week. All right. And if you do that, you'll catch everything we teased at the top. Some of it we're not going to have time to get to, but you should see the video of the Georgia teacher kicking the kid out of the class. You should read about the Mexican businessman who has been arrested and sentenced for funneling money into U.S. elections for Democrats. What are you showing me?
We still got to do the vote of the week, man.
Oh, yeah, we got that. We're going to wrap up with vote of the week.
Okay, sorry.
And
don't let me stop you then.
oh, that's okay. That's okay. That's what you showed me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't understand what that was. I mean, I knew what it was, but okay. I get it now. All right. What was the other thing we teased, though? That's where I was headed. And there's a lot of good stuff there. Russia Medley, yeah, you got it. Oh, and no more DACA. I'll tell you, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Let me just make this point real fast. If I rob a bank tomorrow, or if I start a Ponzi scheme today, and I make bukus of money and build a life for my children and my wife, and they are just used to luxury, and I get arrested in 10 years, are you telling me that you will allow my children and my wife to keep all the money because they never did anything wrong? That is what DACA is.
Well, if your Ponzi scheme was called a deferred action Ponzi scheme, then yes, they would get to keep it all.
That's what it was. That's exactly what it was.
We should do that.
This idea that children should be allowed to benefit from the crimes of their parents is so absurd. It's so absurd. It only proves the point we're making earlier.
Cruel is the word you're looking for. That's the word Mark Zuckerberg and all the media is using. It's right. Cruel. Mm-hmm. It's so cruel.
How many people could Mark Zuckerberg, if he really wanted to, imagine the neighborhood he could build and house all of these people? And here's the thing, Mark, they'd never have to work a day in their lives. You have so much money that you could cash in. Just one of your billions of dollars would feed, clothe, and house these people for generations. For generations. Cash in $1 billion, build a neighborhood, house, feed, and clothe 1,000 people for the rest of their lives.
I'm sure he's working on it. He's got some lawyers looking at it.
Easy.
He's going to knock that out tomorrow. He's deferring spending his billions to defer these people.
Think about it. Think about this. If you were to give the average family $1 million today, average family, they could pay their house off. You could have a financial advisor that would show them how to invest the rest of the money. It would net probably about $40,000 to $50,000 a year in interest, right? Just sitting in an account. So now they have almost $1 million in savings, but then they're making an additional $40,000 to $50,000 a year to live off of, and they're done. They're done. He could do that. He could do that for 1,000 families tomorrow, no problem. But he chooses not to.
I would be waiting on that, but I'm actually still waiting on Beyonce to send me some money.
I hear you. All right, our photo of the week this week is Magpool. Tell us all about it, Mr. Hulon.
Magpool announced last week the long-awaited Magpool GL Enhanced Magazine Well for the Glock 17.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Gen 4.
What? Oh.
That's right. Oh. The Gen 4.
Wait, are you serious?
So literally a week after the Glock Gen 5 was released, Magpool is now releasing parts for the Gen 4.
To be fair, it was more like 3 days.
Okay, yeah, you're right. It was definitely less than a week. I'm sorry.
It was on the store shelves August 30th, and then on September the 1st, Magpool announces. If that's not funny to you, we'll explain why. So you have a Gen 4 Glock, right? And it's been around for years and years and years and years and years. And then Glock comes in and goes, or Magpool comes in and says, tell you what, enhanced Magwell for the Gen 4. Let's release it. And then Glock says, hey, here's a Gen 5 that has a built-in enhanced magwell. And 3 days later, Magpul goes, by the way, we got this thing for your old school Glock that'll enhance the magwell. Isn't it awesome?
Kind of the ultimate troll by Glock, because they put the magwell in the gun now.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's really all that much better, I couldn't tell you. I just think it's really funny. Like, if I was Magpul, okay, and I'd been working on this thing for a while, I probably wouldn't have sent out a press release. I would have just added it to the website and just let it kind of slip in,
slow roll it
under the cloak of darkness. But I think they kind of missed the boat. And, here's the thing, because this probably won't be the last time that they're the vote of the week, because Magpul has a history of announcing products and then not releasing them until people have just lost their mind. So they tell you about all these great things they're going to do, and then everybody gets all worked up about it, and then you don't ever see them. Like, it takes a year or more for most of their products to actually get to the consumer. And they came out a couple years back after SHOT Show and said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop telling everybody all the stuff we're working on because they won't leave us alone. They're blowing up the phones. We can't even get anything done because they won't leave us alone.
Yep.
So now we're just going to not tell anybody anything. So instead of telling us they were working on this, they just come out with it 3 days too late.
Hard to imagine. Pretty poor planning on the marketing department, I'd say there. Probably should have been looking ahead. Oh, there's a new Glock coming? They're going to announce it on the 26th? Let's see what that's all about. Oh, wells. All right. As always, you can find us online at feltrecoilshow.com. And if that's not good enough for you, you can find us on all the socials, facebook.com/feltrecoilshow. Instagram, it's the same thing. You can also email us, Chris or Patrick, respectively, at feltrecoilshow.com. If we missed anything, you let us know. And otherwise, we'll see you next time for episode number 43 of the Felt Recoil Podcast.